What, or who, or why is Playford? Well, Playford is a what and a who. And to understand the what, we need to start with the who. So, the who is John Playford, born in 1623, son of John Playford, uncle to John Playford as well. Not a particularly imaginative family, it turns out. He was a publisher and somewhat of a royalist at the time of the English Civil War, and he even published Charles I's execution speech, somewhat political, and an account of his trial, initially sanctioned by the government at the time. Later, that got into a certain amount of hot water. They actually issued a warrant for his arrest and seizure of all the copies that he'd published. Some of them still survived. They weren't that successful, and about 10 days later, he was doing publishing for the government. But still, somewhat political in his early career. The first 26 or so of his publications were all political in some stripe. He pivots after that into music publishing very heavily. Most of his books are then music and dancing, and that's why we're interested in him. In 1651, he published The English Dancing Master, the first substantive collection of what we recognise now as English country dances, and it set the pattern for dancing and dance books for some time afterwards, and even influences stuff in the present day. The title, The English Dancing Master, is definitely a little bit of a comment on French and other European dancing masters and sort of saying, we English do dancing as well. And in fact, it reversed a trend where we had been importing a lot of continental dance and dancing that into the courts. And eventually we exported our dance style all across Europe. Playford and subsequently his son Henry monopolised this area for some time. The original volume of 105 dances and tunes expands to 3 volumes over 17 editions, with the last one being published in 1728. That's a remarkable run at that time for something like that. Other publishers, as they come in, take on some of this, and more dances were published. But Playford's Dancing Master was the big thing to start with. So, what's the style? Well, that's a little bit tricky. We can say this. Playford's books, and those of the other publishers, describe dances in sets. Mostly either 3-couple sets, dancing 3 couples facing a partner, or 3 or 4 couples in rounds, as many as will in larger round circles, and long ways for as many as will. Either duple minor, where each time through groups of 2 couples dance together, or triple minor, where 3 couples dance together. Over time, those styles become a bit more uniform. Towards the end of the period where this sort of dancing was done, the predominant style becomes triple minor, and mostly only 32-bar dances. The figures become a little less interesting as well, a bit more uniform. Footwork begins to take over in a later period. But the early dances have quite a variety of set shapes and tune lengths. But that's about it. What else does Playford tell us about the style? Really, not very much. It's fairly clear that this book that Playford published, and he published it, he probably collected the dances from other places. He may have written some of it, but not very much of it. It wasn't a book for learning to dance. It was a book for people who know how to dance. It's got a little bit in, but not very much at all. It was assumed that you could dance in that time period. John Playford was publishing at this time in the Inns of Court for the trainee lawyers, essentially. And they were expected to know a number of different dance styles and dance them. There are records of some of them being punished for not taking part in certain dances. So that's where we're at there. But he doesn't tell us all that much. The pages of Playford are maybe about A6 size. It's a small book. He gives us 1 page on style. And on that, he says a double is 4 steps forwards and close, a single is 2 steps and close, set and turn single is a single to one side, then to the other, and turn alone. The rest of that page is dedicated to abbreviations for single, double, things like that. Man, woman, etc. That's all he gives us, really, in terms of how you move through the dances. The rest we have inferred from other dance books. There are others which contain diagrams and descriptions of much more footwork. Quite a couple of French books, in fact, that help us out there, including one which complains that the English don't have any good set style and we just do what we like. But surely, I hear you cry, there must be a little more information within the instructions. No. Playford's assuming familiarity here, both in terms of music as well as the dance instructions. Let's look at Maiden Lane. There's a typical layout here. We've got page number at the top, we've got a title, spelled slightly differently to how we would now, but that is the time period when they were inventing the spellings. We've got a little set description, and we've got a diagram showing that set. Fine. Then we've got some music. Now, the music itself is a topic for an entire separate video and not one that I am at all expert in. But you will notice it is not the same style as we would write sheet music today. It is not particularly clear. And in the Playford books, there's a certain lackadaisical attitude towards accidentals and bar lines and things, which make it somewhat tricky sometimes. But as I said, that's a topic for someone else's video. Then we come to the instructions. They are concise and neat. You've got to give Playford that, but they are not clear or comprehensive. We can see the dance is in 3 parts, and we can relate it to the music, which is good. Sometimes we can't. But there's no indication in this dance of repeats. Maybe this is just once through the dance and then you stop. It's entirely plausible. Many people dance Playford like that. Doesn't give a particularly long dance, but who knows? Playford doesn't say. Then there are some specific instructions. And this dance contains one of the most controversial instructions in Playford dancing. You'll notice that it's in 3 sections, and each section starts with a thing. A leading up, a double and back in the first, siding in the second, arming in the third. Now, leading up at a double and back, we're fairly happy with. Arming, we think, is fairly clearly an arm turn. That's okay. But siding is a bit more controversial. Cecil Sharp is the man who is famous for rejuvenating Playford dancing, finding it in libraries and bringing it back to popularity. But he didn't know what siding was. He didn't have access to the sources we have now, which have diagrams and instructions on siding. He had to work from what he had, and what he knew was Morris. So he invented something that's very similar, I believe, to the Morris half jip, which is a crossing the set, turn to face your partner, cross back sort of move. It's fairly clear now that siding is merely go forwards into line to stand next to your partner and retire again, forward and back. That's borne out by a number of sources. And Cecil Sharp, I believe, also decided in later time period that that was probably right, but it was a bit too late to change Eftis's style by that point. So this is a fairly easy dance to interpret. As we look through, we've got lead up a double and back, go up towards the band, or the presence as it sometimes describes in other books, and back again. You do that again. And you can see the markings there to indicate times through the music, or parts of the music, first strain. And then we go a double to the left hand and back again. There are 2 ways you could do that. You could do side steps, or you could turn to the left, go forwards and back. Not entirely clear. Again, a bit ambiguous, but not a major failing if we do it one way or the other. And a single hay on each side. A hay, a weaving figure known in a number of places. Fairly easy. Single hay suggests that it's just each side doing it themselves, rather than a double hay involving both sides of the set. Third part, set and turn single, that again. So we've got a punctuation at the end of each turn. Second time through, deciding twice, back all, change places, that again. Fall away from your partner, cross over the set, fall away from your partner, cross over the set. Set and turn single twice. Now in the third part of the dance, a right arm turn and a left arm turn for symmetry. Could well be as it's right arm turn, left arm turn, right arm turn, left arm turn. But the music suggests something slightly different. It would take slightly longer than 4 counts for each. And then we have a bit more detail here, something more unusual. First man change with the second woman. First woman change with the second man. So first short corners are going to cross, while the last changes with his own. Third couple changes across the set. And now we have everyone moved somewhere else from where they started from, and then they cross down to the bottom, top couple crosses over, brings everyone back to the top, back to their place in terms of side, but you now have the first couple at the bottom of the set. And that's interesting, because that suggests to me that this maybe would be repeated, because you've progressed the dance, and in a fairly typical progression. But we don't know. It's hard to tell. And there you see why we have all this ambiguity. So there you go. That's John Playford. That's what he tells us about the dancing. Everything else we know is taken from somewhere else, or we've invented it because it feels good. So that's always worth remembering. Thank you.